This slide shows us what we're going to be talking about today. So Nik software is 25 years old as of this year. It's amazing. I've been using the software since about 2009, kind of professionally. I learned about it in 2008 as Nik used to actually come to the college that I went to and taught us all about all of the great things that they were doing. And that's how I found out about it in 2008. And ended up working there from 2009 to 2014, teaching webinars just like this one. All right, so we are talking about the brand new, brand new presets that are built into Color Efex Pro and Silver Efex Pro. We're gonna go into examples and how these recipes work, how the presets work within Silver Efex, although it's pretty similar. And then we're gonna talk about how to customize your recipes and do global adjustments as well as save your own recipes. So let's go ahead and get started here. And we're going to begin, by the way, I'm going to be presenting from Photolab today primarily, and then I've got an image that I want to show you in Photoshop, and we'll take a look at launching the Nik plugins from Photoshop, and then I want to just talk about some of the slight differences in workflow as well. All right, so the first thing that you're going to want to do as you approach the Nik plugins is don't open them yet. Launch your raw processing software like Photolab or Photoshop or Adobe Lightroom or whatever raw processing tool you're using, and you're going to want to do some work to the image probably. Like in this case, I might want to adjust the white balance. We could go in and fine-tune contrast and tones, and there's all sorts of fantastic adjustment tools, including control points, that are built right into Photolab that I would probably use first. For this demonstration, I'm going to kind of skip that stuff, and we're going to go right into the Nik collection because we've got a lot to cover. So I've kind of already massaged some of these images and kind of got them where I wanted them to be before going into the Nik plugins. And in this case, I just adjusted the crop. I cropped it down a little bit, and then I made some adjustments to white balance to get it closer to where I wanted it to be as we move into Color Efex Pro. All right, so from Photolab, to launch the Nik collection, you move into the lower right corner of the interface and you simply click the Nik collection button. Your plugin selector is going to come up, and this is where you're going to have access to the different Nik plugins that are built into your Photolab as you've got them installed, and your settings as well. And we're not going to worry too much about settings right now, but there's one thing that I want to mention towards the end of the webinar in regards to the settings, and we'll get to that. I'm just pointing it out right now. For now, we're going to go into Color Efex Pro 4, and I want to show you where the recipes are, kind of how the recipes work, and then walk you through how to make adjustments to those things, because the beauty of a recipe or a preset is it's going to give you, a potential look. It allows us to see what your image or our images might look like when we scroll over or click on a particular preset. And in this case, we're going to use a recipe. And by the way, the difference between a recipe and a preset, because I kind of use them interchangeably, but they're not. A recipe within Color Efex Pro is, if you will, a preset, but it's full of different filters, right? So for those of you who are brand new to Color Efex Pro, it's a collection of 55 individual filters. You likely already know that. And on the left side of the interface, it's laid out in alphabetical order. So you can find all of your filters laid out in alphabetical order when you're on the All tab. These buttons in the upper left corner are just different ways of organizing your filters, so you can find different filters, in this case, for different kinds of photography. I'm on the All tab, so you're seeing all of the filters. On the right side of the interface, you've got your filter stack. And right now, we just have the Dynamic Skin Softener filter, which is a filter that we're going to be using on one of the images in this webinar. For now, we don't need it. But we also don't need to worry about anything on the right side. I just kind of want to walk you through a little bit of the interface, because as we start clicking on things, these sections of the interface will change. That is, when we move into our recipes, so if you follow my cursor on the left side of the interface, and we move into the lower left corner, I click on the word recipes, and this is going to open up our 25th anniversary recipes here in Color Efex. I'm actually going to click the back button here. So in the upper left corner, we'll go back just so you can get a sense of what sort of the overall recipes section looks like. In here, I've got all of my recipes. I've got my custom recipes. So these are any recipes that I've created and saved into my Color Efex. We'll talk more about that later. Recipes that I might have imported, my favorites, recently used, sample recipes, which are 10 recipes that are built into the software, the En Vogue recipes, which is a collection of recipes that came out early this year, I guess it was, and then the 25th anniversary recipes, which are these brand new recipes in the Nik Collection 3.3. And let's go ahead and click on that. So we'll click on the 25th anniversary recipes. And this is going to pull up our recipes section here, where we have our classic portrait recipes, which are the specific ones we're going to be talking about today. So if I click on this recipe, what's going to happen is the recipe filter stack is going to be applied to our image. You're going to see it on the image, and then you're also going to see on the right side of the interface the filter stack actually change. So let's do that. We're going to click on Classic Portrait High Key Bright. As we do this, a little warning pops up, and it's going to pop up every single time for us today. This is just telling us that it's going to replace the filters that are currently in our filter stack, right? Which basically means if I had done any work with my filters on the right side, and then I clicked on a recipe, it by default is going to replace anything that you've done on the right side. So that's why it's warning us. It's letting us know that this is going to reset everything and apply this new set of filters. And as long as you know that, you can just click the yes button. And as long as you know that, you can also click this little checkbox here where it says don't show again. And then this warning doesn't pop up anymore. For me, because I do these webinars, I leave these prompts so that everybody can see and I can kind of explain it. So nobody's getting a sort of false sense of what's happening. So I'm going to click the yes button. This is basically going to apply our recipe that we've clicked on. So you'll see the image change, and then you'll see the filter stack change. So before we had the dynamic skin softening filter, now we've got high key and brilliance and warmth. And now I don't think this recipe works for this image. But what's great about it is we could go in and start to massage these tones, and maybe we do want a high key image. And we maybe just want to reintroduce some of the color, right? So you can click on a recipe like we did, and then you can go into the different filters and you can make adjustments to fine tune the image the way that you want it to be. And we're going to go through all of these recipes, but just so that you can see a before and after now, we literally clicked on the high key bright portrait recipe. We've got our high key filter and brilliance and warmth. And if I click the compare button in the top sort of upper left quadrant of the interface here, press and hold that, you'll see the original image, and then you'll see the enhanced image with these filters applied to it. And I actually kind of like what's happening to the image, but let's keep moving. I'm going to click on Classic Portrait, Hint of Color. I'll click yes. So now we have the black and white conversion filter, high key, right? So it's just the two filters, and it's doing this to the image. Now, again, what you're seeing on the left side is what's going to happen to your image when you click on it. So the next recipe is Classic Portrait Smooth Skin. I'm going to say yes here. And now we've got Dynamic Skin Softener and Glamour Glow, which is a beautiful combination of filters for all sorts of portraits. All of these portrait recipes work really nicely to give you a completely different aesthetic with just a single click. So if I click on Classic Portrait Soft Matte, it's going to give us this sort of like warm, almost sepia tone color, but color image. And it kind of looks like this vintage image, which is definitely a look and kind of works for this image. These are some of my friends. We were in New Orleans last year in September, and taking a nice little group portrait of some buds. And this would be maybe a nice Christmas or holiday gift for them. And I kind of like the treatment this way as well. It's like, yesteryear or a bygone era or something like that. Everybody's holding each other and hanging out and having fun, All right, so Classic Portrait Soft Matte. Let's keep moving. We've got Classic Portrait Warm Glow. I'm going to click yes. So you can see why maybe you want to turn off that warning, because it pops up for me every single time. But as long as you know that every time you click on one of those recipes, it's going to replace all the stuff that you've done yeah, just sort of be cognizant of that. So Reflector Effects, Glamour Glow, Darken Light and Center. This is actually the preset we're going to use in this case. But we've got, oh no, that's all 5. I actually wanted to click on some of these other really nice recipes because they are really fun. They're not necessarily what we're going to be talking about today, but there are 25 of these, 15 of these new recipes that are built into the 25th anniversary version of these brand new tools. All right, so let's stick with warm glow. Let's keep moving. We got a lot of stuff to cover. I could talk about every one of these different recipes for 10 minutes or more. Let's just hit the ground running. Let's talk about how to control this stuff. So we've looked through the recipes. I've clicked on the soft glow, warm glow recipe, and we're going to adjust these filters. So let's get into this. I'm going to move into the reflector effects. And I'm not going to talk about every single slider and what it does, but I will talk about some of these tools because they're slightly different in every filter. Meaning in the reflector effects, we have a method. And this method is going to apply a different kind of overall look to the image. Right now, it's a gold reflector. So this is kind of trying to emulate what would happen if you had introduced a reflector into this situation, like a physical reflector when shooting the image. So the gold one is going to warm the image. Soft gold isn't going to warm the image as much as gold. It will a little bit, and it actually has a little bit more of an intense fill. Right, so I'm going to turn these off so you can see what I'm saying. If I turn reflector effects off, here's the before, here's the after. So it's warming the image, it's kind of brightening up parts of the image, and then we have control over those aspects, right? So with the gold method, it's warming the image quite a bit. If I move down to silver, now it's not going to warm the image, it's going to try and keep that fill. Right, and what I mean by fill is it's trying to fill in shadow areas. It's trying to bring in some light into these different areas so that the image is a little bit brighter, basically emulating what would happen if you used a reflector. And in this case, I do want to stick to the gold because I like how it's warming the image quite a bit, but a lot of the different filters within Color Efex have drop-down menus, right? And it's good to note those, and it's nice to kind of just run through each one to see what it's going to do. Right? You get a very different look out of these 3 methods. And that's what happens with all of the different filters whenever you're using those drop-down menus or pop-up menus, whatever you might call them. In the Reflector Effects filter, you've got your method, you've got your light intensity, which is the amount of fill that's going to be added in. Right? As I slide it left and right, you can see what it's doing. Hopefully that's not too fast. I do understand there's probably a little latency in our connections. Your fall off, right? And so the fall off is kind of like the gradient. So without going too far into it, this filter can't emulate exactly what would happen if you were using an actual reflector on set, if you will, taking this picture. But the light fall off here allows us to change kind of the gradient between the effect of the reflector effects, which you're seeing down here at the bottom, and then where it's not being affected up here at the top, right? So this is the gradient between the two. The position is kind of where the light fall off meets. So it's the positioning of the reflector, kind of, and then your source direction. So you could actually put the source of light up in the top left corner or in the top right corner by rotating your source direction. I'm going to place it at 180 degrees. So it's going to come from the top down instead of the bottom up in this case. And I'm going to go ahead and just lessen or reduce the light intensity. We'll take a look at the before and after. There's the before. There's the after. I love what it's doing. It's kind of warming the overall tone of the image. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and push in. I'm going to use the position and make it bigger, and that's going to affect more of the image. We'll reduce or move into the next filter. So reflector effects, it's trying to emulate what would happen if you used a physical reflector. Glamour Glow does a really nice job to kind of give this soft aesthetic glowing feel, which is exactly what would have happened in this lighting situation because it was humid and overcast, right? So the feel that we got out of the original image, so I'm going to click the compare button to show you the original. This is what the exposure looked like, right? And that's good, but it's not what the exposure or the experience felt like. And that's what we're going for here. By warming the tones, by introducing this Glamour Glow, and then maybe even by turning on the dark and light and center filter, this is more of what that portrait felt like being in that space. And that's what I'm after in this situation. So maybe I'm not necessarily creating a true to life sort of situation, but when I give this print to my friends for holiday, I want them to kind of get a sense of that situation. I want them to feel like they felt when they were there. And by sort of massaging the image in this way, we're going to be able to do that. Now, darken, lighten, center. This is one of my favorite filters in the entire world. Out of any filter in any piece of software, if I only got one, it would probably be this filter. This tool allows us to relight the image practically, right? It darkens the border while brightening the interior. At least that's how I'm going to use it right now. In the initial preset, it was actually lightening the border to give us this sort of soft, high key kind of feel overall. But what I want to do in this case is sort of direct your eye as the viewer towards our subject. So we'll do that by, because they're centered in the image, we're going to darken the border and we're going to lighten the center. And then we're going to make sure that the center is right on our folks, right on our people here. So what we'll do is click this place center button. And what's going to happen is we're going to allow our cursor is going to turn into a little crosshair because I've clicked that place center button. And this is going to allow us to change where the center of this filter is applied. So, you know, if I had something really important over here on the left side, and I wanted to direct your eye as the viewer over there, I could place the center over there, right? And it's going to shift the center of that filter, in this case, brightening that area, kind of darkening everything else. You know, and obviously I don't want to do that in this case. What I want to do is kind of place it right on my friends here and direct your attention in towards them, right? And in fact, I don't need as much of the center luminosity. I don't need to brighten them as much because they're already kind of soft and bright because of the adjustments that we've made. But I do want to kind of darken the border down just a little bit to, again, direct your attention towards our subjects. And I think I've talked long enough about this image. Let's just take a quick look at a side by side. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to click in the upper left quadrant on the side by side preview. Well, I'm going to do three things, I guess. I'm going to go ahead and click on this button. So the button in between the two images, it's going to rotate them so that I've got my original image on the left and the enhanced image on the right. And then I'm just going to tap the tab key on my keyboard. That's going to hide those tools palettes on the left and on the right. And what you're going to see now is on the left image is the original, on the right image is the enhanced. I haven't, you know, completely changed everything about this image, but now I'm able to kind of port the feel or how I felt in that situation when shooting this image. You know, the original photograph is good, it's fine, but our enhanced image on the right side here using our preset is basically going to allow us to relive that moment in time. It's warm, it's glowy, it's somewhat humid feeling, you know, and I think it works nicely. But that's how you use a recipe, right? You click on the recipe, it applies it to your image. Most of the time, you're going to want to go in and make changes to the filters, maybe even more subtle than what we did. But now we've got a nice effect. We're all done editing our photograph, so we're going to click the Save button in the lower right corner of the interface. Now, when I click the Save button, it's going to bring us back over into our host piece of software. In this case, it's Photolab 4, but if you were using Lightroom, you know, you'd go from Lightroom into the Nik Collection, and then you'd click the Save button, it would bring you back into Lightroom. Or in Photoshop, it's going to do the same thing. You'll be working within Photoshop, you launch into the Nik Collection, and then when you're done, you go back into Photoshop. So it's a nice way of working in this way. And here in Photolab, and it's going to work the same way for any Lightroom users, Adobe Lightroom users, you will have your original image within your film strip, and then you're going to have your enhanced image right next to it as well. So it should save into the same folder by default. Unless you go and change that, let's say within Lightroom, but that's a different conversation than what we're doing today. All right, so we've got the sort of basic use down of those recipes. So let's keep moving. Let's create a custom recipe from something that's already been created for us in those the 25th anniversary portrait recipes. So this is Lewis here. He's a good dude. We were out on a walk. I've met him a couple times, and he lives right here in Rochester. I'm coming from Rochester, New York, by the way. It's a chilly 34 degrees. This was a picture from this past spring. Nope, actually the spring before. And let's see, does it say? October 2019. So it would have been fall. Sorry about that. And we were out for a nice walk and saw him here and let us take his picture. I've cropped this image square. And now I want to kind of stylize this photograph. I like this portrait. It sort of seems like a touristy kind of portrait. Let's go ahead and shift the aesthetic quite a bit from the kind of flat, linear feel that we've got into something that's a little more fun. So we're going to click onto the Nik Collection in the lower right corner. We're going to go into Color Efex, and we're going to apply the classical soft matte recipe. And then we're going to fine tune it and add to it as well. Now, I don't think I mentioned what this tool is doing last time we opened the software. Because we launched from Photolab, this works exactly the same way as a Lightroom user, by the way, we are able to work in a non-destructive workflow, which means anything that we do here within Color Efex, we can save it, when we're done, and then next week or in an hour or 3 weeks from now or whenever, we're able to open back up into our Color Efex software and reprocess the image, start to finish. It's a non-destructive workflow that's built in. But to use it as a Photolab 4 user or as an Adobe Lightroom user, you have to make sure that you are using a TIFF file. And this is one of the features that I wanted to talk about in regards to the settings tool. And we're going to in a couple minutes. But for now, this prompt is telling us that because we're working with a TIFF file format, we are able to work in a non-destructive process. It's one of these really nice new features within the newer versions of the Nik Collection. Okay, so to utilize that feature, by the way, you want to make sure that this little checkbox is on in the lower right corner. Right now, it's not, or it is on, and you want to make sure it is on if you want to work in that non-destructive process. So I'm going to make sure that that's on for now. And what we'll do is we're going to just jump right into our soft matte, which is this recipe, and I'll click yes. And now we've got our Photo Stylizer, Glamour Glow, and then this Filmfx Vintage filter. And so right off the bat, it's transformed the image into something completely different, right? And it has this sort of a vintage kind of aesthetic to it. And we're going to run with that, but we're going to massage it, we're going to change it, we're going to save it as our own recipe. And again, these are starting points. Anytime you use a recipe or a preset, sometimes it's going to just work and you're going to just be able to click on it and you're going to be super happy with what happens. A lot of times, you're probably going to want to go in and fine tune it a little bit. And in this case, that's exactly what we're going to do. So with the Photo Stylizer filter, which by the way, let's turn off Filmfx and Glamour Glow. This is going to give us a sense of what the Photo Stylizer filter is doing for us. Right, so here's the before, here's the after. We're going to change our main application of the filter, right? So here's one of those drop-down menus. I'm going to switch it over to Veritone, right? This two-tone or multi-tone sort of tool. We can go into our style. So this particular filter has multiple drop-downs, and you can click on it, and then basically this is going to give us a different color rendering, right? So it's shifting those colors that are being applied to the photograph. And I'm going to click on number 2 right now, right? And just to show you a little bit more about this filter and kind of how extensive these tools are, if I click on Veritone and we go back to, let's say, copper or russet, well, this is the overall application, right? This top section. The style is then specific to that overall application. So the russet filter in Photo Stylizer has 4 different ways of applying color, right? So this is where you can get, down into the weeds in this software. You can use those presets and you can be very happy with it, but you can also go in and really fine tune and create your own look exactly how you want it to be by basically using these tools, by figuring it out, spending a little bit of time or a lot of time if you enjoy doing it, and then saving it as a recipe so you get the same exact aesthetic every single time. So I like the Photo Stylizer right now. I'm going to increase the style number 2 and the strength. If you bring this strength slider all the way up, you're going to get a very strong effect and transformation from these filters. But you can go and dial them in or down depending upon where and at what sort of level you want those tools to be set to. So I've got Photo Stylizer. Let's move into Glamour Glow. So I click on Glamour Glow, you're going to see as I turn it on, it's just this subtle, soft, glowing effect. If I bring my glow up to 100%, you get a 100% effect. I mean, it's a stronger Glow. And what it's doing is it's kind of softening the edges, and it's looking for the edges of things and giving you this kind of blooming kind of effect or softening effect around the edges of things. I'm not going to worry too much about saturation because I'm happy with the effect. We're going to move into film effects right now. Turn that on. And this is what's going to give us that vintage effect overall. And I feel that this is effective in this way, right? You could go into these different sliders and adjustments and do whatever you want with them so you get exactly what you want from this filter. But I like what's happening. I just think overall it's too strong, right? So rather than moving into the saturation, warmth, vignettes, brightness, and all of these different things, if I like the effect but it's too much, what you can do is click on the words control points. Every single filter has this tool, right? So if you click on the words control points, and by the way, we have yet to talk about a control point or what they are, but if you click on the words control points, this is going to open up into your control points list. You don't see any control points listed out because we haven't used them yet, but this thing here, this opacity, is the global opacity of this particular filter. So it's the strength overall of this filter. If I bring the opacity up, it turns this filter on completely. If I bring it down, it's going to bring it down to 0, right? And so this is a really easy way to be able to fine tune the amount of these different filters that you're putting on the image, right? Because overall, I liked the combination ratios that were within the Filmfx vintage and the film type. Look great. I just thought it was too strong a little bit overall. So I'm going to dial that back down. If you ever want to see what that particular filter is doing, you can, of course, just click on the checkbox that's to the left of the label. You'll see the before and the after, right? Let's say we're happy with that, but I want to go one step further, and I'm going to show you a fun filter that I don't find a lot of applications for, but when I do, I really like it. I'm going to click the Add Filter button, and on the left side of the interface, you notice what happens as I click Add Filter. Or on the right side, both sides of the interface change. It basically buttons up the right side of the interface when you click that Add Filter button, and then it changes, or you switch from the recipes section that we were just in into the filter library. Now, we're going to use the Polaroid transfer filter because this is a really fun filter that creates this interesting aesthetic overall. And it kind of gives me this fun vintage kind of effect, which I like in this case. It looks really nice. Polaroid transfer. All right, so the border slider. If I increase the border, it's going to give us this nice sort of live edge border, as if we were actually shooting Polaroid film and maybe transferring it onto another substrate. We've got texture, which you can't really see the texture. I'm going to hit Control plus a couple times. It's going to zoom us in. I'll give it a second to render. Watch what happens if I take the texture out. So you'll see there's like a paper texture. If I take this down to 0, we'll have our smooth digital image, right? If I take my texture up, what's happening is it's overlaying like the texture of a paper substrate. And so you're seeing that show up here. So you can decide whether you want any texture or some texture or a little bit. I think it actually works nicely to have a little bit here. I'm going to zoom back out. So to do that, I'm just going to hit the space bar. There's a lot of shortcuts, by the way, and there's a page on the DxO Nik software help page where you can get a sense and you can get a list of all of the different shortcuts, whether you're on Mac or PC. It's really nice. Outer color. Okay, so we're going to increase the outer color. Again, what we're doing here is we're emulating what would happen if we used the Polaroid transfer kind of physical technique with an image. I'm going to decrease the smear. So it's just going to bring us back into a little bit more detail. And then the tear off, I'm not going to use any tear off, but just to show you what it is. But again, what this tool is doing, the Polaroid transfer filters, it's emulating an actual physical Polaroid transfer, which is a technique that you could do with Polaroid material. Some Polaroid, well, a lot of the Polaroid material actually. Anyways, we've got our overall effect. Let's take a look at our before and after. We look at the compare button. We've got our sort of straight image, which is this nice kind of documentary image or something. It sort of is showing Lewis in this time and place, framed, in a square image. And then here we've just got this really kind of interesting aesthetic overall. Now let's say we like this, and we have maybe a series of images that we want to apply this same effect on. We can save our own custom recipe by moving into the right side of the interface and clicking the Save Recipe button. When I do that, the software is just going to ask me to name the recipe. So I'll call this Soft Polaroid, right? Yeah, let's do that, Soft Polaroid. When I click the OK button, it brings up the custom recipes, right? So now we're back into the recipes section of the interface, and it's going to basically save it for us in our custom section here. So you'll see that right there. Next time I open up the software, if I want to use the Soft Polaroid custom recipe, I just click on it and it's going to give us the Photo Stylizer, Glamour Glow, Filmfx Vintage, and Polaroid Transfer. And that's how you save a recipe, and that's how you kind of go in and massage your recipe to kind of make it your own as well. So we'll click the Save button. And let's keep moving. We're going to click the Save button, and we're going to jump over into Photoshop, and we're going to actually use two pieces of software on the next image. We're going to use our Silver Efex Pro as well as Color Efex Pro. Let me change that interface. Okay, so we're in Photoshop this time. I want to do this to kind of show you how to launch the software from Photoshop. So you'd use the Nik Selective Tool to do that. And then also, I would just want to talk a little bit about why you might use the Photoshop version of the software, and that's to implement tools that exist within Photoshop and layer-based photo editing tools that don't exist in other situations. And actually, everything that I've done here could have been done within Lightroom or could have been done within Photolab 4, right? But I've chose to do it here in Photoshop because A, it's a good example just to show you, and then B, I think in my own workflow, I probably would go into Photoshop for this, right? So the first layer that I have here is actually a little hair cleanup. So if we zoom in and I turn on layer number 1, I kind of could have named that. I'm just getting rid of a lot of the stray hairs, not all of them, but a lot of them, right? And then my layer 2 is actually the regalia that Rachel is wearing here is the wrong color. When she graduated from college, they didn't give her any regalia. She just graduated during COVID, and they didn't have a graduation ceremony, so she didn't get regalia. So what we did was I just changed the color of it. And I think that my saturation is a little bit too much on this. I'll show you a trick for that as well. But basically, I'm using the Colorize filter, which is one of the filters within Color Efex Pro, to just change the color from red to brown. And then I used a mask, so masking technique in Photoshop, to only apply it onto her regalia. I also used control points to kind of hone it in, and then used the mask to sort of finish it. Now, the next layer here is a Photoshop saturation layer, and you'll just notice as I turn this next layer on is that it reduces some of the saturation on the regalia because my color that I chose wasn't perfect. So I've just sort of darkened it and given it more of a brown tone, because that's the color of the regalia that she would have been wearing for her graduation. So we kind of faked it. She graduated, didn't get the regalia, but we fixed it. Don't worry. All right, so to access the Nik collection from Photoshop, you can either go up to the filter drop-down menu and then click into the, I gotta be on a different layer apparently, go into the Nik collection, and this is how you would access the Nik tools from your drop-downs up in the top portion of your Photoshop interface. I tend to use this tool. This is a handy dandy Nik Selective Tool here, and this is gonna give us access to all of the suite of Nik plugins. And then it also gives us some other options as well. I need to expand mine out, I guess. And what we're gonna do, I'll show you that part in a second just to keep us on track for time. But I'm gonna click on Color Efex Pro 4. We're gonna click on the recipe. We're not gonna need to do much work because a lot of photographs, you don't really need to do that much, right? Some of them need to be highly transformed in certain situations, whether it's aesthetically or, like for creative purposes, or if it's just to correct issues that might have happened in the exposure or the creation of the image in camera. In this case, I'm pretty happy with the overall result, but I want to use the smooth skin recipe, and it's just going to apply a little bit of skin softening and Glamour Glow. And the skin softener filter, I think, is an important filter to kind of talk about for portrait purposes, because it does a nice job to reduce texture on skin, while not applying the filter anywhere else, right? That's kind of the beauty of the dynamic skin softener, is you don't have to worry about complex masking in the reduction of detail in areas where you don't want it to be, right? Because skin softening is basically blurring. There's a lot of different techniques, but it's basically blurring textures that you don't want, right? So if we look at the original image here, we've got the sort of just straight photograph. And as I turn on dynamic skin softener, you'll notice it nicely reduces some of the texture, right? Now, the way that you hone this in is you start with the color of the eyedropper, the color of the skin tone that you're trying to adjust. What you'll do is click on the eyedropper, and then you want to choose an average skin tone. So I don't want to choose anything from underneath her neck where she's in shadow, and I don't want to choose like the brightest highlight on her cheek or on her forehead. I want to kind of choose something in between. And what's going to happen is this filter, once I've chosen the skin tone, it's going to reach out into those slightly brighter tones and the slightly darker tones to reduce some of this texture within the skin. Now, once you've chosen your skin tone, you'll notice it kind of snap to, in fact, or it will basically reduce the texture in those colors. If you need to increase this color reach, like if there's a lot of contrast on the subject's skin between the brightest tones and the darkest tones, you can take your color reach slider up. And this is going to reach out away from the original color, right? So instead of just choosing this color that's this color swatch is displaying for us, it's going to reach into darker colors of those area of the color wheel, and it's going to reach into the brighter colors in that area of the color wheel. And if you bring this color reach all the way up, it's basically going to reach out into all of the colors. It kind of softens the entire image. And so you want to be careful as to this setting, your color reach setting. In fact, all of these sliders, you want to be careful, because if you apply too much of this, it can reduce texture in areas where you don't want to, like around her eyebrows or her eyelashes, or textures around her necklaces and so on. So you want to be careful as to your color reach. And in fact, 25%, the default setting, is pretty good for most images, unless you've got very high contrast situations or low contrast. If you've got like a no difference of highlight to shadow. Anyways, small, medium, and large details. I'm going to hit spacebar. So the spacebar tool is just going to zoom us all the way out. And the way that I explain these tools is that these sliders are dependent upon a couple things: the resolution of your image, and then the size of your person, right? So if this were a headshot and this is a 45 megapixel image, if this were a headshot and it was only like her shoulders up, the small, medium, and large detail sliders mean something slightly different than this sort of like 3/4 shot, right? And that's because her skin only takes up a small percentage, maybe like a tenth of the overall image is her skin, maybe probably less than that. And so you would adjust the small, medium, and large details according to sort of those parameters, and then you'd also want to zoom in, right? So that you can get a really good sense of what the small, the medium, and the large detail sliders are doing. I don't think that we even need to use any of the large details. If I slide this slider all the way up just to 100, you'll actually notice what it does. It reduces the kind of highlight areas and the shadow areas. It's softening, but it's doing it in areas where I don't want it to. So I'm going to bring the large detail slider down to 0. Medium details. So again, what it's trying to do is the software is looking for these details and textures, the edges of things, and it allows us to control the blurring or the softening based upon those details. So you want to kind of go in and figure out what's going to work best for your image. The medium details is doing a nice job to reduce some of the sort of larger areas, sections of her skin here that maybe need to be softened a little bit. And then the small details, this is going to get right down into the pores, right? So if I start to increase the small details slider, you're going to see her pores start to really just disappear. And you always want to be careful. I would say with skin retouching, less is more, because you don't necessarily need it to be blatantly obvious that you're doing skin retouching. You just kind of want to soften it up a little bit for a lot of folks who would prefer to have a less sharp image of their skin, let's say. That's one of the problems with, this is a 45 megapixel camera. If you get the right part of the image in focus, you're going to get a lot of texture in the eyes, I guess, depending upon the kind of portrait you're shooting, but in the eyes, in the skin, around the eyes, and so on. In this case, this is a very short depth of field, but she's pretty sharp at the same time. So I want to be careful as to how much and how I'm applying the skin softener. Glamour Glow, this just sort of finishes it off for us in terms of this sort of glowing overall effect. I love it. It works really well for portraits. And if we just look at our before and after, it's subtle. Here's the before, and there's the after. But we have this nice sort of softened feel overall. I might have pushed the glow a little bit too far, so let's reduce that a little. Now, when we're done, we just click the OK button in the lower right corner. I'm happy with this, so we'll click the OK button. This will bring us back over into our host software, Photoshop. And notice what's going to happen in Photoshop. We'll have a separate layer of pixels, right? So the separate layer of pixels will be above that last layer of saturation adjustment. Now, there's all sorts of different thought processes and workflows in regards to Photoshop. But in this case here, I think that we've done a nice job to kind of soften her skin. It's this kind of polishing layer that just finishes the image off. Now, for her graduation, I gave her images that were in color. I also gave her some images that were in black and white. So let's actually take a look at that, because there's some really nice presets that are built into Silver Efex now for our 25th anniversary. So let's click on Silver Efex Pro. We've spent most of our time in Color Efex, but everything that we talked about rings true in Silver Efex as well. You've got a whole series of presets. When you click on that preset, it applies the adjustment to the image. In this case, we're just doing it using the tools that are built into Silver Efex. So I'm going to go into my recipes. So let's go to preset library. The software does look a little bit different because now we're not looking at 40 or 55 individual filters. We're looking at Silver Efex, which is our black and white software, black and white conversion software. And so it responds a little bit differently. But you'll notice it's just, we've got our presets on the left and you've got our tools palette on the right. Now, if I click on Classic Portrait, this is Classic Portrait, Angelic and Faded. It's this sort of soft, old school aesthetic. I think it works nicely. I think I would maybe put a vignette on the image and I'd be happy with it. I've loved the grain and this sort of warm sepia tone that's being applied, or sort of warm brown tone. It's almost a coffee. But let's click on these. So we've got our 5 different presets here. So this one is Hollywood Glamour, right? Nice high contrast. Here we've got our rugged portrait. Maybe not perfect for Rachel here, but could work. Here's warm and soft, right? And then if we scroll through these, there's another 5 filters for street photography, or designed for street photography, but can be used for all sorts of things. Let's say we like the warm and soft. I think it works nicely for this aesthetic. I think now I don't have sort of the nice grounding kind of tone that's going to print really well, meaning I'm going to go ahead and take my dynamic brightness slider, I'm going to darken it down just a touch and take our highlight slider up just a little bit. But basically what we're getting here is a recipe that's going to give us an overall aesthetic. I'm going to amplify that aesthetic by adding in a little bit of soft contrast. And then I say we finish the image off with a little bit of a vignette, although I didn't show you guys control points. I need to show you one more image where we talk about control points. Here in Silver Efex, the control points, what they're going to allow you to do is dodge and burn and control contrast throughout the photograph. So if I click on the control point button on the right side here, and I go in and maybe add some contrast to her skin tone, too much. Pull that back just a little bit. By adding that contrast selectively, it's going to start to attract your eye as the viewer into her face at this point. If we want to reduce sort of your eye going into a particular area, I'm going to darken it. So basically, the human eye is going to be attracted to the brightest, highest contrast areas in an image. If your photograph is color, you're also going to be attracted to the more saturated areas of the image. Here, I can place control points on the different sections of the photograph, and we can control all of these facets: brightness, contrast, structure, amplify whites, amplify blacks, fine structure, and selective colorization. We do not have enough time to talk about every one of these different tools, unfortunately, but don't worry about it. If you're interested, we have so many tutorial videos, both directly on the DxO Nik software website as well as on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and you jump onto the DxO Nik specific page, you'll see all of the sort of official webinars as well as short tutorial videos that kind of explain these different aspects, like structure. It's a really wonderful tool here. And I'm kind of just working away as I'm talking. Anyways, long story short, we used our classic portrait, warm and soft. I'm going to click the OK button. I've got one more tool that I really want to show you before we break for our questions. So I'm going to hit the OK button. We're going to jump back over into PhotoLab, and we're going to launch Color Efex again. And I want to show you how to use control points within Color Efex Pro, because the control points we had in Silver Efex allow us to manipulate what's happening within the black and white conversion, right? We can brighten or darken, we can add contrast, and so on and so forth with those control points. In PhotoLab, or sorry, in Color Efex, you have a different kind of control points. So let's crop this image really quickly here in PhotoLab. So we might do that like this. You know, there's a little more work that I'm not going to do to this image that I probably would normally, well, I definitely would normally do. Like in the lower left corner, there's a extension cable that you can see. We're just going to crop it out for now, but I think in the real picture, what I did was I cloned it out using Photoshop. There's a repair tool here in PhotoLab that you could use if you are not a clone tool kind of person from Photoshop. Okay, I'm going to click close. It's going to give us our group shot image. Let's go ahead into the Nik Collection, and we're going to click on a recipe. And before we do that, because there's two things I do need to show you. First of all, let's go into the settings section. We could talk about this stuff for hours, and hopefully you're somewhat entertained right now and learning a little bit. But I want to show you two things. In the settings section here, because we're launching the Nik Collection from PhotoLab, if I click on it, what's going to happen when I click the Color Efex software is a copy of our original image is made, and we're making our adjustments on the copy. You can actually see that in our film strip. We've got this picture of Lewis here, which is a DNG, that's my raw file, and then we've got our enhanced image, which is right next to it, and that's a TIFF file. So what we'll do here is we're going to export as a TIFF. I'm going to recommend that when you're using the Nik Collection, that you use the 16-bit per channel process. So you process it with a TIFF file in 16-bit. The other tools we're not going to get into right now, but these are important facets for making adjustments to your image, just TIFF 16-bit. I'm going to click the OK button. We didn't actually make any changes, but I wanted to show that to you because we're going to make a change in a minute. We're going to go into Color Efex. It's going to jump in. We're going to click on our preset. This is a portrait that I shot several weeks ago. This is a pod. They live together. This is they're all in. They go to the same college, and they're all best friends. One of them is my niece, and we shot some portraits for Christmas. So they are not wearing masks because they live together. I was actually wearing a mask and was about 10 feet away. It was hard to make this happen because there's so many of them, and I had to set up by myself. But anyways, that's a different conversation. All right, so let's move into our, let's move into the smooth skin. Let's just use that recipe again, right? And then what's nice about this recipe is that we can actually go in and apply the skin softening on multiple people at one time if they have similar skin tones. Or we could have, if folks have different skin tones in a group picture, multiple applications of the same filter. So I'll show you what that looks like. Dynamic skin softener. You know, I think this skin softening is working really well for these three and possibly her. Lily has a slightly darker skin tone, and then also Tyler, we probably don't want any skin softening. He's got great skin, and you know, maybe we want him to look a little bit more rugged, so we're not going to soften his skin. So the first thing that I'm going to do, just to get rid of it off of him, is I'm going to take the minus control point, and we're going to just remove the skin softening off of his face, right? So here's what you do. If you want a filter applied in a particular area, you use a plus control point from the right side. If you want this filter removed from a particular area, use a minus control point. So for the sake of me not doing double skin retouching, I'm going to remove this from Lily here. We're going to reduce the size so that the area of influence is only encompassing her. And then we're going to kind of focus our skin retouching, this application of the filter, on these four, because they have pretty similar skin tones based upon this image. And what I want to do, because this can get a little bit complicated, we'll just keep it simple. We're just going to use the eyedropper tool to try and find an average skin tone for all four of them, right? And I think in this case, I'm not exactly sure which one to choose right off the bat, but what we would do is just click and see. And if it works, if this skin tone works for everybody, and you'd figure that out by just turning it on and off, you're run with it. I think where I clicked works pretty well. It's softening their skin nicely. I actually don't think I need to make many changes because we're retaining detail in her eyes and in her hair, but we're reducing the tone or the texture within the skin everywhere else. All right, so let's say we're happy with that. We've got our minus control points, removing the filter from some areas where we don't want it. Maybe even would be smart to place some minus control points on Tyler's arms. And then we're going to click the plus or the add filter. And we're going to actually apply a second dynamic skin softening filter. So let's do that. So you just click the add filter, click on dynamic skin softener. And this time we're going to choose Lily's average skin tone. Right, so I'll go and click on that. It will do the skin retouching on her, hopefully, getting the ball of doom. Well, there we go. Okay, cool, it worked. And the other thing that we want to do here, I'm going to zoom in first of all to make sure we're getting what we need out of this. And I'm happy overall. Maybe we don't need the large details, reduce the small details just a touch. And of course, you know, we probably want to be more precise than this. I'm trying to just make this happen with a few minutes left. But anyways, I'm going to take a plus control point this time, and I'm just going to place it on her. And what that does is it tells the software that we only want the filter wherever this control point is going, right? And that's another sort of facet of using control points. I hit the delete key on my keyboard, and that gets rid of the control points. So now this dynamic skin softening filter is being applied to everyone on the image. And we probably don't want that because we've already got dynamic skin softener applied on the areas where we want it from the first application. Now we just want it on Lily, so I'm going to click the plus button. I'm going to place it on her cheek here, and then we're going to reduce the size, right? And now we only have the dynamic skin softening filter on her, and so we are only doing that second application of the skin softening on her. Now, from here, for the sake of showing you a highly transformed kind of effect, let's click on Filmfx Nostalgic. And I am not a huge fan of what's happening on this image right now, but I want to show you the non-destructive process that's built into the Photolab and the Adobe Lightroom versions of this software. Because our little checkbox in the lower right corner is on, I'm going to click the Save button in the lower right corner here. This is going to bring us back over into our Photolab. It's going to apply the filter. And then what we're going to do is actually come back into Color Efex, and we're going to remove that Filmfx Nostalgic. / we're going to reprocess the image. Right, so we're going to be able to kind of go back in and adjust from the work that we've already done. And that's the beauty of this non-destructive processing. So we've got our original image back in Photolab. We've got our enhanced image here. And let's say we want to open that back up so that we can change it, make another version of the image, or fine tune, get rid of the Filmfx Nostalgic in this case. So I'm going to click on the Nik Collection. Now, before we click on Color Efex Pro 4, because we want to reprocess the image, the trick is to go into the settings section, and instead of duplicating this image as a TIFF file, what we want to do is click on the Action drop-down menu and say Export Selective Files Without Processing. So this is the setting that you want to be on if you want to re-edit your image if you want to go back in and process it again. So we'll click on that, click the OK button. Now when Color Efex Pro 4 opens, it opens this TIFF file. And what you'll notice is that our dynamic skin softening filter, Glamour Glow, and Filmfx Nostalgic are going to be applied on the image. So we're just going to click the OK button. All of our control points are still here, right? If I click on dynamic skin softener, the control point is still on Lily. If we go back to the other dynamic skin softener, we've got our minus control points where we put them. We go into film effects. And the trick here is that we're processing the same image, right? So now I can just get rid of Filmfx Nostalgic, say, oh, okay, I much prefer this. Click the save button, and that's going to bring us back over into Photolab. And we can open this back up again if we wanted to make changes and adjustments. Anyways, I've gone a little bit over on the amount of time I wanted to spend doing this stuff. I think we covered everything we needed to cover, but Lori, let's go ahead and just transition into our Q&A. So we've got a little bit of time here. This is going to take a second to kind of update.
Okay, got 3 questions for you. One, can you show how to add another recipe rather than replacing it by holding the shift key?
Good question. So this one should actually change now. I'm not sure what happened there because we clicked that. We'll give it a second to update because maybe it hasn't gone back in. Okay, so the question was, how do you add more than one recipe on the top of your initial recipe, right? So let's open this one. We'll go into our couple image, click on Nik Collection. Because we're not reprocessing the image, kind of concerned about this one still. So because we're not reprocessing the image, you have to go back into settings, and we're going to go and tell this to export as a TIFF file. Click OK, click into Color Efex. So the question is basically, how do you use more than one recipe at a time, right? Because what we did when we clicked on a recipe is it replaced all of the filters on the right side of the interface, right? I'll show you what that means again. And what we want to do is not replace the filters that are on the right side. There's a trick to it, and it's basically the shift key on your keyboard. So I'm going to click OK. Let's go into recipes. Let's go into one of these others. I'm going to go into En Vogue, and I'm going to click on, how about lavender? Probably in alphabetical order. Okay, so I'm going to click on the lavender filters. This is just a different recipe. Okay, detail extractor, let's turn that off. I like what's happening with the Filmfx Nostalgic. And let's say we want to then go in and add our bright portrait recipe. So we're going to go back. We're going to move into our 25th anniversary, scroll into our filters, and I'm going to add, how about smooth skin? How about that? So if I just click on this recipe, it's going to replace the Filmfx Nostalgic. It's going to replace that old recipe that we clicked on. If you hold the shift key down and click on the smooth skin, it does not replace your old recipe / your stack of filters, the work that you had done before. So by holding the shift key and then clicking on your recipe or on a new filter, you're basically going to be adding to whatever your filter stack looks like. And that's how you do that. Good question, Lori.
There's a question about what was the name of the filter you used to change the graduation gown?
Yes. Geez, I keep getting this. There we go, it responded. Okay, so the filter that I used to change the color of Rachel's graduation gown was the Colorize filter. So I won't show you exactly what we did there. I'll just show you basically the technique. And that is, you click on the Colorize filter. If you want to change the color outright, what you need to do is get rid of the color, right? And then add a new color. And the trick there is the method. So with the Colorize filter, I think it's method number 5. Yeah, method number 5 creates a black and white image. It desaturates the image completely, and then it applies whatever the color is on top, right? And so this is the exact technique that I used for Rachel's gown, is I used Colorize, method number 5, and then I chose the color that I wanted by clicking on the color swatch, and then just sort of tuning this. So let's say we're going to make let's see if we can shift her red dress to be blue. I'm not sure if it's going to work. I haven't tried this before on this image, and it does and can take kind of extra masking like we had to do in the Photoshop version. But let's change this to blue. So it gives us this really kind of dark tone. Maybe we need to massage that. But watch what happens if I take a plus control point and I just place it on the red area of her dress. See if it works. Depending upon where you put the control point, you're going to get a dramatic difference, right? But now, as I expand this out and maybe add a couple more plus control points, being very precise, we can basically change the color of her dress, right? So now it went from red to blue. Her skin tone is starting to turn because, of course, her skin tone is primarily reds and yellows. You could start to take some minus control points and place them, you know, in the areas that are being adjusted. Or what I did in the Photoshop version is I did this stuff. I tried to get it as precise as I possibly could while in the Nik collection, and then I used the Photoshop masking to sort of hone it in. So it looks a little bit funky right now because we also have Filmfx Nostalgic, but we basically changed her red dress to blue with a couple control points using that one filter.
Cool. Okay. There are a few people that are not able to see the 25 preset anniversary presets. So I wanted to let you show them where to find their version number. They should have 3.3. So if they go into that Nik, logo there.
So, and I didn't say what I was doing, but if you just click on the Nik logo in the upper right corner of whatever the Nik interface you're in this case, Color Efex, this pops up. And Lori, go ahead and explain it. I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not at all. I was just gonna say, just double check under version where it says version 3.3.0. That's where you should see the version number. If for some reason you think you have 3.3.0, and it's not showing up, I'm going to send you a link of where you can get customer support and they can help you with that.
Very cool.
Okay. Dan, I think that's it.
Cool. Thanks, Lori. That was fun.
Great job.
Absolutely. Wonderful. All right. Well, is it okay if I say goodbye to everybody, Lori?
Please do. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. All right. I'm going to click back into here. You know, again, we talked about the presets within Color Efex primarily. We did get to open up Silver Efex, and I showed you those 5. There's, of course, way more to talk about. This is my last webinar until, I think, February, which is both exciting and not so exciting. You know, a little break, but I'm going to have all sorts of great new content and things to talk about when we start those back up. If you don't already have the software, definitely pick it up. All right, I'm going to sign off, but Lori, go ahead. I don't know if you want to finish as well. I didn't do a very good job saying goodbye, but I appreciate everybody stopping in. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Dan, for a great presentation. You got lots of positive feedback on this one, as usual.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.